Hey there, welcome to the garage. My name is Buck. I have Squib across from me.
Hello.
Today we're talking about a cartridge. This is one of our, hopefully first of many cartridge talks, Squib.
This is a big daddy we're bringing on for our first one.
Today is a 300 Win Mag.
Oof.
And not only is it my favorite cartridge, if you've been following along with the series, you already know that. So hopefully we can get through this episode with some really good information and then talk about some other stuff in future episodes because I'm sure the listeners are getting tired of it by now, Squib.
Oh, I don't know if you could ever get tired of 300 Win Mag.
It's a great cartridge. Before we get into that, we're going to do our ceremonial. What's happened since the last recording?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go first because I think I'll be a lot more brief.
Yeah, Squib's been impulse buying this
Squib's
past
been
week.
busy, folks. He's been very busy.
So what you got there in that pretty red container?
So I am a collector of sorts. I hate that term, of sorts, but I'll use it now. I'm a collector.
It's fitting.
Something that I collect are weird cartridge reloading dies, especially the ones that I know I'll never use ever in my life.
But it could inspire you to eventually buy that firearm in that caliber, which might not be a bad thing.
Maybe, maybe not.
I don't know about the one you got in front of you.
So in this case, for the listeners, we have a Lee die set, which I like Lee. It's a Lee carbide die set for .455 Webley.
What you going to shoot with that, governor?
So it's a tip-open revolver, which the British used in probably both World Wars.
Mm-hmm.
I know they for sure used it in the First World War.
They're also very commonly seen in British films, even today.
Yes.
You see that in a lot of British films.
Very interesting revolver action, and even more interesting cartridge.
Mm-hmm.
I opened up the pistol dies when I got them, and I looked at the sizing die to see that they're stamped 45 long Colt.
Really?
Or 45 Colt. Just 45 Colt.
Okay.
Which is okay, because that was Lee. That wasn't some punk at a gun show who swapped the dies. They're both straight wall 45 pistol cartridges, so why, spend the money stamping .455 Webley onto a sizing die when it'd be the same as a 45 long Colt?
Yeah, it makes sense.
So,
and Webley revolvers are just they're a cool piece of foreign firearm history. I mean, they're not always the most visually attractive revolver, at least to us Yankees over here, but man, they are cool. They certainly have their place in firearm history.
They are definitely cool. I will say that there's nothing .455 Webley does for me that Mr. Sam Colt's revolvers don't.
Yeah.
So we will have that American bias.
Absolutely.
I have no issue with that.
But they are a cool pistol, though.
Yeah.
If I could have one in my collection, I probably would.
You should.
Because if nothing else, they are a heavy tomahawk to throw at your opponent.
Not that you'd want to throw them, because they are rare pistols nowadays. The price of military surplus, as we've kind of talked about in our episodes, is always going up.
Yeah, and it seems like the British surplus doesn't really hit the U.S. market very hard ever.
Well,
I don't know if we missed our window on that and we were just too young.
No, so what happened was Australia, because British used to colonize Australia. A lot of Lee Enfield rifles, probably a lot of Webley revolvers ended up with the soldiers in Australia. If they were out of the service at some point, maybe they sold their Enfields and pistols to the local Aussies. And then when the Australians, shout out to our listeners, if any, in Australia.
Yeah, if you're in Australia, please send me a kangaroo.
Something like that. But when they had their big gun buyback, words are tough, Squib, all those rifles, all those pistols were confiscated.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me if there was also some weird British law about exporting pistols for military surplus. I mean, we see Lee Enfields, at gun shows and whatnot still, not as common as we used to, but they're still out there. But I wonder if there's some weird British law on that, because I can't recall seeing very many of those ever offered as surplus from Cabela's, Shields, or even at gun shows. You just don't see a lot of Webleys.
At the same time, though, if you think about British in the World War time period, I mean, they were getting bombed pretty profusely. So
yeah,
they also, it wouldn't be a far-fetched to say that the British might not have built as many guns as their allies.
Right.
So maybe, I think it can be explained without getting into British gun law, because that's a thick book, I'm sure.
Oh, I can only imagine. Unless their book just says no.
But yeah. And honestly, I think the Australians would really like me, Squib, because right beside the .455 Webley die set, I have a set of 25 303 British dies.
Ooh, nice.
So 303 British neck down to 25 caliber.
Okay.
I've been looking for an Enfield receiver so I can have a custom barrel made.
Right. Well, we have a gun show coming up next week, so I'll keep an eye open for you.
for a Lee Enfield receiver. I can
Mhm.
put wood on it. I can put a stock on it.
Okay.
And 25 303 British, I think, would be a spicy meatball.
That would be pretty awesome. I would love to see
Something
it.
that not a lot of people have.
Yeah.
And honestly, that was a popular wildcat in Australia,
Mhm.
not widely known here in the States.
Yeah, I had never heard of it, frankly.
Yeah. So that is one I'd like to have because I'd probably be one of a handful of people that
Right.
would own a gun cheaper
That'd be
than
a
that
cool one to
cartridge.
do a review on.
Yeah, for sure. But enough about me, Squib. What about you?
Oh, Squibs.
Let's hear all of it.
Squib's card's been getting swiped all over. New Colt AR on the way. Picked up within the past week or 10 days. I've probably acquired another 500 rounds of 223. And I mean, just this morning I picked up another 150 rounds of 9mm because there is
normal
a run
Squib
here.
things.
Just
Very
Squib
normal
stuff.
Squib things.
But our area right now, there's a run on ammo. Just with world political events, things going on in the country. There's a run on 5.56, 223, 9mm. It's getting scarce in our area right now. So I'm contributing to the problem by panic buying a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, just I've been picking up a bunch of stuff lately.
Well, and when the 9mm is at $10 to $12 a box, which
Yeah.
we haven't seen in quite a long time due to COVID.
Yeah.
Alone.
I just picked up some Aguila today for I think $12.99 a box, which not my favorite ammunition manufacturer. Not my favorite, not my least favorite. But I compared to Remington for $19.99 a box. It was an easy decision for me to make.
I need to shoot more and kind of compare those manufacturers because I haven't had any issues with Aguila, but I also haven't shot Remington to kind of compare it or different manufacturers and purposely spotted differences in the ammo.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be the cop out and say my favorite 9mm is Federal.
Oh man!
Just because usually it's always some of the cheapest. I've never had an issue. That's usually what I shoot in competition is like Federal 124 grain.
Strong stance.
Never had an issue with it.
Federal.
Nothing against Blazer, or I don't know if it's Blazer or Blazer. Everybody tells me different. I'm calling it Blazer because that's how it's spelled.
It's a cool name.
It's a cool name.
Blazer
9mm. But yeah, I just
dodgeball reference, folks.
Love it. Gosh, that was a great movie.
Yeah, Federal makes good ammo. I also find myself gravitating to them because they're cost effective.
Yeah.
I won't call something cheap if it's not cheap. And because cheap, that word kind of assumes bad quality to go along with a good price.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't slap that on Federal ammunition.
No, I'd say it's good value.
It's a good value. And that's a great way of putting it.
Yeah.
Minute of deer, which for some people, that's good enough.
Right.
So if that's good enough for you, Federal, I've had better luck. Probably 2 inches. Probably the 2 inches at 100 is probably my widest group with Federal.
I got you. So not bad.
And rifle ammo. So pistol ammo, I don't talk about how that stuff groups.
Yeah, I question how accurate grouping statistics or those results are on pistols because there's so many variables. Unless you're gonna stick it in a vise or something and shoot it, it's really hard for me to say, oh, this ammunition is better at 15 yards versus another. I look for reliability more than anything else because if I want it to go bang, I want it to go bang when I hit the trigger. And
I'm so biased being a rifle shooter, and at 100 yards, I'm dissecting a 1-inch group versus when someone or a target is 7 feet in front of me. I can't even start to think about how I'm going to break down my groups because I know my fundamentals are good on my end. 7 feet versus 100 yards is a big difference. So
Yeah,
I'm
huge
not.
difference.
I'm not getting into that.
Exactly.
As long as it's center of mass or where I was aiming, good for me.
Yeah. So a lot more bang bang food and some new little shooters coming to the safe here pretty soon, and it should be good. It should be a week of receiving packages that I don't want to tell my lady about, but luckily she's pretty cool.
We love receiving the things we've ordered.
Absolutely.
It's like that meme, if you've seen it, Squib, and for our listeners, if you've seen it, drop a like or a comment or a subscribe or something. And it's a picture of Roger from American Dad leaning out the window with a cigarette, and it says, when you just ordered your package and you're waiting for it to get there 5 minutes later.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's just...
Yeah, shout out to Midway USA for shipping my order out same day.
Shout out to Midway. Their shipping is excellent in getting it out of their hands.
Yeah, I ordered a Wilson Combat 4-end for that Colt rifle that I just ordered because I ordered the Colt rifle without any furniture on it because it saved me like $250. And that way I could put the furniture I want on it because I think buy once, cry once. Stop buying extra parts to put on your rifles. They're just going to sit in a bin.
You also bought a Colt.
Yeah.
So if you bought a Colt, then you can't cheap out on the parts you're putting on.
No, I'm pretty excited. My first Colt ever, actually, for personal ownership.
Good for you.
Yeah, shot with so many Colts over the years. had a few loaned to me, but I've never purchased one myself. So now I'm going to go buy an old school Colt trucker cap and tell people 2 world wars whenever they question me.
Oh gosh, Squib's turning into the FUD on the podcast. I'm just
It can
thankful.
happen.
I'm thankful it's not me. So
Yeah,
all those Colt fans are listening. Hopefully,
right.
drop a comment and tell us how Squib did on his deal.
Yeah, did we do good? We're at like 750 on the rifle,
Yes.
and I'm going to be done with this thing with the beautiful primary arms 1 to 10. Probably
SLX,
around
yep.
1250, 1300 when we totaled it. So that's
Around there.
in today's
With
day and
optic.
age, 2023. That is
Yeah.
not too bad for a Colt rifle.
Well, you
opticed up.
take the optic out and you're under 1,000.
Yeah,
and I think that is applaudable.
mm-hmm.
Very much so. So Colt fans in the comments, let him know how he did.
And Colt haters, let me know why you hate Colt, because I haven't found a reason to yet, other than their shelf price tag.
We're here for all the smoke, aren't we?
Absolutely.
So, well, okay. Now that we've kind of gotten through what's happened in between recording sessions, we can dive right into the 300 Win Mag, my favorite cartridge. Kind of the specs. We're just getting into the whole pool, right into the deep end. But most cartridges start with a parent case. Not all of them. Cartridges like the 300 Rum. I think the 300 came out first. I'm pretty sure. The 375 Ruger. All those 2 cases came out on completely new brass body designs.
Mhm.
And then from there, they obviously entered more cartridges based off of those brass designs. The 300 Win Mag, and I hope there's some debate in the comments, Squib, because it is parented by the 375 H&H.
Back to the British.
Yep, H&H standing for Holland Holland, British firm. And that was, at the time when 375 H&H released, it was the thing. The thing. And especially in that time period, you had a lot of British sportsmen going down to Africa, because at that time, British still had some colony land in Africa. And 375 H&H would be great for an Africa safari.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can't think of anything that you probably couldn't drop with that.
Yeah. So H&H designed a lot of nice double rifles. They would make very exquisite double
Now, when you say
rifles.
double rifle, are we talking like a side-by-side?
Yes.
That is awesome.
Both.
Or over-under, I suppose.
Over-under, side-by-side. Double barrel rifle. Had rifling. English walnut most of the time.
Something
Absolutely.
so foreign for what we see now. You don't really see a side-by-side rifle cartridge in American production. Not very many.
If we were to hop across the pond, you'd still find them. Even in Africa, I think some lodges might still carry them for like auxiliary guns, maybe guide guns.
Sure.
I think they would be fantastic firearms, but I think for the American convention, we want something with a little bit more capacity for more cartridges.
Yeah, I mean, if I got a lion come at me, I probably want more than 2 rounds.
Well, and maybe some old British fellows who would like to argue that with you. I think the argument for us would be brown bear. That can. I don't know anything about lions, but I do know, grizzly bear.
Mm-hmm.
You want to put a couple.
Yeah, I want to put every round I can before it gets to me.
Exactly. So 375 H&H spawned the 300 H&H, which was as successful as the 375. And that pair, 375 and 300 H&H, has probably spawned, I haven't done the math on this and I should, they probably spawned more cartridges than any other case ever existed. And maybe 30-06 is in there, because 30-06 is spawned, if you count the 308, which I do, as many cartridges as you can think of.
Yeah.
So, but 375 H&H and 300 H&H have spawned a lot of families. You have the Winchester Magnum family, which we're talking about the 300 today. You also have the 264, the 338, and the 458 Win Mag.
Yeah, and we're not talking 338 Lapois. This is 338 Win Mag.
338 Win Mag, which is actually a little shorter than the 300 Win Mag.
Oh, I didn't even have to ask what the differences were.
No. I like the 338 Win Mag. Probably not as much as I like a 300 Win Mag. I haven't had as much success with a 338.
Yeah. 338 just has some cool history behind it, especially from Vietnam.
Yeah. Still a lot of punch in that cartridge. I would love... There's someone out there who's made an M1 Garand or some type similar action in 458 Win Mag.
Ooh.
And I feel bad for whoever shoots that gun.
For when the Germans are wearing big body armor.
For when the Germans are hiding in their trench with a house in the way and a foundation and whatever you put in between your target.
That Panzer tank between you and your target is no longer a Panzer
straight
tank.
Through 458 Win Mag.
That's a sheet
don't
of
worry
plywood.
about it. So that cartridge family is spawned from the 375 and the 300 H&H. We'll just call it the H&H family. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
The Remington Magnum family, that was another one. Really popular 7-rem mag.
Mm-hmm.
That's come from the H&H family.
Yeah, we still see that in modern production today.
Yes. Well, it's one of the most popular 7s. Mm-hmm. Even with the 7 PRC and even with the 280 Ackley, 7-rem mag is still one of the most popular deer cartridges in the country. Mm-hmm. One of my favorites, Squib, the Weatherby Magnum family. And this is actually one where you'd be surprised how old they are. Because Weatherby, Mr. Roy Weatherby, invented his first cartridge when he threw Weatherby into his LLC. When he actually made it a company, he released the 257, the 270, and the 300 Weatherby Magnum. And they were blisteringly fast, like ridiculous, especially the 257, which was Roy's favorite. And that's a lot of what I like the philosophy behind cartridges. Speed kills. Box ammo is often referred to as not mild, but kind of backed up, so it can work without pressure issues in most of your
right. You got to appeal to more people in the market that way.
Yeah, and that's okay for factory ammo. As a hand loader, I feel like the reason you do it is to unlock the true potential of the cartridge, and I feel like the Weatherby cartridge family is a great way to do that. And that was kind of the philosophy behind them when they first were released. So, aside from the Weatherby Magnum family, one that I actually really want to point out was the 308 Norma Magnum. And this is not to be confused with the 300 Norma Magnum. They're two different cartridges, which I actually had to research to make sure that they were two different cartridges.
Yeah, because I probably wouldn't know that off the top of my head. I really wouldn't.
Well, and one letter, I mean, I might forget about that in a year or two.
Yeah.
If it weren't for this episode.
Right.
I'll probably remember it now.
It's good reference material for later.
Yes, indeed. So the 308 Norma Magnum, I would actually like to point out because it's held as responsible for the cartridge design that we have in front of us. So the 308 Norma Magnum used a 338 Win Mag case, neck down to 30 cal. That's it.
Okay.
Now, we mentioned earlier the 338 Win Mag is shorter than this 300 Win Mag. So what they did is they made the 300 Win Mag case longer, and in doing so, the neck on this case ended up being shorter than they wanted it to. A lot of ballisticians say that you want your neck length to match the diameter of the bullet, and the 300 Win Mag does not do this. So they had a lot of concerns for whether the short neck was going to be able to put the right amount of tension on the bullet to keep it concentric when you put it in the bore. So it's not banging up against one side of the wall in the bore or versus the other, which would cause accuracy issues because it's uneven.
Right, not seated correctly.
Right. So that was their concern. I haven't had an issue with it. And I consistently get half-inch groups with this case. It's mildly forgetting to load. I'll say that I've really only tried one powder. So, I mean, you want to talk about forgiving when you go out and you have one load development test and you pretty much nail it. I would call that as forgiving as you can get.
Absolutely.
So, I use, in these cases, not that we're kind of skipping stuff in the notes, but I use a 180 grain bullet. You can load any 30 caliber grain in these cases. And I'll caveat that for the listeners. The bread and butter for factory options, and not bed and breakfast, but bread and butter. I know. I saw the look on his face, folks. 150 grain to 220 is kind of the majority of what you're seeing in factory ammo.
What's the lowest you can go down to?
They make 110 grain VMAX 308 bullets.
Why?
You could stuff in there. I don't know if I've seen load data for them. I
Mm.
don't know if I want to, and I would strongly suggest against a 110
I just
grain.
can't imagine that light of a bullet having that much powder behind it, and it just doesn't make sense to me.
And you got to wonder how fast it's going. I don't know.
It's gotta be scooting.
Well, and I almost wonder if once it exits the muzzle, if it's going so fast, if it would tear itself apart. Because that is something you can run into if you run a bullet too fast.
Sounds like something we need to load and test, Buck.
I don't know about that. I think I'd rather leave that up to the factory plants and the manufacturers. But I like 180 grain. I think it's a nice medium. A lot of people nowadays are going to load 200s and 220s, and they'll get into that 200 uh, spectrum because it's a heavier bullet, flies through the air a little better than the 180. I still like the speed I can get with 180 grains combined with the
180 grain. How fast is that moving like FPS?
So I gave up a little FPS for accuracy. You can stoke this up to, I think Nosler had it at 32 and change for 180.
So a body armor melting cartridge. I love it.
And I think that is more than suitable. I think I'm floating around 3 even.
Okay.
With 180 grain, and I'm completely satisfied with that out of my Remington 700. I'm really happy with it actually, and I'd rather test for accuracy than speed, anyways.
Yeah.
But as a lot of people might point out in the comments, I didn't have to give up too much, which I'm happy for. But a little bit more on the history of the case itself.
Yeah, when was it released?
Talking 1963.
So been around a minute.
It has. It's approaching. It actually might be exactly, 60 years old. Exactly 60 years old.
Yeah, I had to do the math there.
In 2023. It's almost 2024, in which it will turn 61.
Woo!
But right now it's 60.
It can now almost apply for Medicaid.
So close.
It's close.
And in a couple years, it'll be able to pull from their 401k.
Perfect. Social Security's on the way.
Actually, it's already eligible for 401k.
Yeah.
59 and a half. Come on, Buck. Anyways, back on the topic. It was almost designed specifically for the Winchester Model 70, which had been out before this cartridge. Kind of that Winchester Magnum line and the Winchester Model 70. I think they kind of made it to where it would be such an easy pairing when you're putting in your order, where
it just makes sense.
It makes sense. So, but at the time, you could also get them in the classic Ruger M77. You can get them in the Weatherby Mark V, the Remington 700. When those rifles were released, I'll say the Mark V was released well before the cartridge. 700, we talked last episode or a couple episodes ago. That was a 1964 model year. So they were able to hop on that wagon pretty quickly. So it was considered too big for a Mauser or a Springfield action.
Makes sense.
So we're talking World War II. Mauser bringbacks and Springfield 1903s. I say that, but I have personally owned a Czech VZ24, not in 300 Win Mag, but in 338 Win Mag. I didn't have an issue with it in terms of like fitting the cartridge inside the receiver. I don't know how much trouble you'd have, so I'll take the word of the research and say that you probably can't fit this in there into a Mauser.
We could try.
I mean, 8 and 7 Mauser is much shorter than the 300 Win Mag, so we could definitely test it. So nowadays, though, pretty much every major rifle model that is released by any manufacturer, 300 Win Mag's on the list.
Yeah, I mean, you get those series now, like the Savage 110s, the Mossberg Patriot series, the Ruger Ranch. I mean, those rifles that come out that are super affordable and they offer them in like 8 different calibers. Usually, more often than not, you're going to see a 300 Win Mag on that drop-down menu as an option for you.
And honestly, being someone who goes to gun shops very frequently and looks on the new gun rack, it was honestly annoying there for a second because you could go down the line of one brand or one manufacturer and it would be 6.5 Creedmoor, which we're used to that now.
Yeah.
A lot of rifles in 6.5. 308, 300 Win Mag is on that list. 30-06, maybe some 270s.
But like
and
the occasional 243.
Maybe. But those, especially during COVID, those were the only chamberings I could find on the new rack.
Yeah.
And of course, in the specific gun I wanted. So maybe there was some more selection with other firearms, but not the ones that I wanted to look at, of course. So 300 Win Mag, you can find it under a rock in terms of rifle chamberings.
Yeah, I mean, you can walk in almost any gun store in the U.S., and you're probably going to see it on the ammo shelf for sale, and you're probably going to find at least a handful of rifles chambered in that caliber.
And so with that, you also get every major ammo manufacturer loads all kinds of different types of ammo for this cartridge,
which is good for people like Squib who want to stock up thousands of rounds. I like having it fully available and in the major runs of production.
And when I started with my 300 Win Mag, I bought a couple boxes of Federal PowerShock 300 Win Mag 150 grain soft points.
Mm-hmm.
It actually wasn't PowerShock; it was non-typical. That was a line that Federal did a while ago. I don't know if they're still making them, but that's what I started out with, about 40 cases at a time, just trying to get brass to reload. Because I think that stuff shot 2 MOA, 2 inches at 100, which I was not satisfied with, being a little bit of a perfectionist. Not that I'm calling myself names.
No, we definitely have different feelings on accuracy, because you're looking for that pinpoint accuracy. I'm trying to hit a steel silhouette.
Well, but at the same time, if I'm hunting with a 300 Win Mag, I'd like to be able to reach out at 400 or 500 yards, which the cartridge can do that.
Oh, absolutely.
More than decently.
Yeah, this is a 1,000-yard cartridge
for steel.
On a bad day.
Yeah. But, I in my mind, when I was going through this cartridge, I also wanted to hunt with it as well. And so on a hunting application, 400 to 500 yards, and that's about where I would cap out. And honestly, I would probably want to stock a little closer before I take that shot, just because I practice on a lot of steel and I don't practice on a lot of animals because, well, you shouldn't. But
right.
So I needed something that would get it done. 300 Win Mag will definitely get it done. 2 MOA out of factory ammo would probably get it done. But at that point, 500 yards, you're at 10 inches.
Yeah.
And that's
a lot of room for error.
Well, it's more of a gamble than I'm willing to accept. And I think that's a conversation that each listener, each gun enthusiast needs to have with himself before they go through with a decision like, what cartridge am I going to use?
Yeah. And as far as hunting goes, the 300 Win Mag is a fantastic choice for anything here in North America. You can definitely use it on deer, elk. I'd take it buffalo hunting if I didn't have something ridiculously cool, old school. I'd definitely take it buffalo hunting. I can't think of anything in North America that you couldn't drop with a 300 Win Mag. I mean, it might not be my first choice for grizzly bear hunting, but I'm also not a grizzly bear hunter because, I don't know, bears are cool and I don't want to hunt something that can eat me.
Yeah. I had a thought there, and then the whole bear eating you part just kind of...
It just,
Interesting.
Sorry, I threw you off, Buck.
If you had an M1A or an M14 or an M1 Garand or something chambered in 300 Win Mag, that'd be pretty cool for grizzly.
That would be all right. As long as I'm semi-auto at that point and I can pop some more rounds off, more than 1 or 2 with a bolt, I might be a little more comfortable then.
Yeah. Now, the 300 Win Mag was not the first 30 cal. And I think that's obvious because we did talk about the 300 H&H, but I'm not even talking about that. And in fact, I probably beat myself to it earlier in the episode. The 300 Weatherby Magnum kind of, I don't want to say they threw a rock in Winchester's plans, but that's a 1945 or 1947. I'm pretty sure it's 45. That's a 1945 released cartridge. And you're looking at a 180 grain pill that's probably going at 34, 36, somewhere in there. I didn't look at the...
That's a monster if those are accurate numbers. That's a monster moving.
Yeah. Well, and it was kind of meant for that, speed kills. So if I were Winchester looking at those numbers and being like, we have to follow this up, and maybe it was mild, even if you're talking at 3,200 to 3,400 feet per second in 1945, are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's
nuts.
Fast round for that time.
I'd say anything over 2,700 feet per second would be considered fast for that age.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking 80 years later now of powder development. I mean, look at 9mm from the 50s.
Yeah,
it was looked as anemic, and everybody wanted like a 45 or something with more power. Now, I mean, with modern powder and ballistics, we're way past that.
I will make fun of the 9mm and say plus P.
I'll
make that jab.
All right. All right.
It's not below me.
Fine. I'll take it. As a 9 mil guy,
Anyways,
I'll handle that. All right.
yeah, 40 Smith and Wesson gang. Don't have to worry about that.
Are they still gang? Or are they in walkers with AARP
I
cards
don't
yet?
know. I don't know. Regardless, rifle cartridges.
Right. 300
Dang
Win
it.
Mag.
And the 300, so the 300 Weatherby mag. I can only imagine what kind of challenge the Winchester folks had when they were drumming this 300 up. I mean, obviously you have to make a 300 if you're going to make a 338. I think that's like the standard option. But if I'm looking at velocities of the 300 Weatherby, uh, that was a bold move for Winchester to release this cartridge. I
Mhm.
think.
Yeah, it was them going out on a limb for sure, but it's definitely paid off.
Yeah, because 30 caliber Magnum cartridges have been released after it, but it doesn't seem like anything really stuck.
No, at least not in mainstream popularity. I mean, I'm sure there's those little sects of hunters that, have to have that certain 30 cal Magnum cartridge of their favorite. But as far as what's open and commercially available and common, this definitely has more legs than any of the other ones.
And I'll definitely caveat that because a lot of people are looking for the 300 PRC to come over and knock the Win Mag off its throne.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to do it.
No?
They're trying, but that's kind of like a couple of years ago when 6.5 Creedmoor became starting to get more popular. I mean, now it's just a mainstream cartridge. But 8 years ago or so, when that was starting to come out and starting to get some attention, everybody thought it was going to unseat 308, and I don't think it's unseated it. It's just taken a place beside it.
You think they're evenly matched?
I'm not going to say evenly matched. I'm saying they are equal popularity. I'm saying that they are equally available.
Oh man,
308 might be a little bit more available on the shelf for some people, but I say that. But if I went back to the shop right now, I got so much 6.5 Creedmoor ammo for sale. I have more of that than I have 308 for sale right now.
Well, I think 6.5 Creedmoor has also jumped in price a little bit more than 308. So I
Absolutely.
think 308 and 7.62 NATO is a little cheaper for you to shoot to.
Mm-hmm.
So 300 PRC, and I do want to address this because it is a fantastic cartridge.
Great
and,
round.
Well, and they did what I kind of thought a couple years ago, what it would be cool to do, because the 300 Win Mag has a belted case down by the rim. And back in the day, that was used in double rifles to measure the headspace of the cartridge in the chamber. So nowadays, it's there. They say for strength and integrity. I can see it, but you also see head case separations still happen with this cartridge. So,
and thanks to Buck, we have some beautifully hand loaded rounds from him personally here in the garage. And I gotta say, Buck, these are beautiful rounds that you've loaded up here.
Yeah, it's a brand new batch of brass. I say that they are range pickups, so I do have to keep an eye on these.
Hey, fellow brass goblins, leave a like or leave a comment if you're a fellow brass goblin.
And people are going to just absolutely rip me apart in the comments because this is probably not a cartridge you want to do a lot of brass goblin stuff with.
Yeah, because you just never know, probably.
You never know how many times this thing's been fired, and thus you don't know how many more times it'll take before the case to fail.
Right.
So I do have to be careful with these, but that's okay. I've already come up with a plan and assessed the risk, and that's okay. But yeah, the 300 PRC, they took the belt off. And in fact, they not only took the belt off, but they widened the case to be the same width as that belt. So it's like a tiny bit bigger than the 300 Win Mag in case volume. And then they it was a Hornady cartridge. And they spit out some really good case designs. And the 300 PRC was definitely no exception. So
shout out to Hornady for their stupendous ammunition quality. I mean, I gotta say, if I had to only shoot one company's ammo the rest of my life, they would probably be my first choice.
Bold move.
But being a Nebraska boy, they are made in Nebraska. So
Grand Island, Nebraska.
Yep,
yes,
I would love to support a company in my state. And I gotta say, cool little caveat on Hornady. I wrote them an email when I was like 12 years old.
Oh, really?
Saying I liked their ammunition, and I put my address at the bottom. And about 2 weeks later, I got a care package from Hornady Ammunition.
What?
And I got a hat, a T-shirt, and I think like a little cleaning kit for a rifle. And I didn't pay a dime for it. And I just wrote him an email as a kid. And I got to say, that was just such a cool thing. Maybe that's why they pulled at my heartstrings a little bit, because they cared.
You're a little biased.
I might be a little biased,
That's
but
okay.
I got to say, though, during the Trump administration, the Navy SEAL teams they only trained and used Hornady ammunition.
Really?
Yep. I met the gentleman who was in charge of the middleman between the civilian market and the military for finding them training ammo, and they pretty much had an unlimited budget for their training ammo, and they wanted the best quality they could get, and they chose Hornady ammunition out of Grand Island, Nebraska.
I could see it. They would definitely want something American.
Mm-hmm.
I could definitely see that.
Yeah, so I think it was just a really cool note to Hornady. I just shout out to Hornady. You're my boo.
If you want to come to Scotts Bluff sometime, Mr. Seth, he runs the Hornady podcast over there, or anyone over at Hornady. You want to find yourself in Scotts Bluff, passing through, stop by the garage. We'll have you on and
absolutely. We'll get you a cup of coffee and get you a microphone.
And they still load 300 Win Mag, which I find ironic because you load great 300 Win Mag ammo, and then you release what you want to replace it.
Yeah.
And I will say, I think they do want to replace the 300 Win Mag. That's an admirable feat, if I could say the word right, Squib.
Words are hard.
Because the 300 PRC is a great cartridge. And I think a lot of people are going to hold these two in contention. I think the 300 Win Mag keeps up with the PRC.
I think so.
At an extent. And there's got to be a lot of things that are the same, or at least comparable, for it to happen.
On the subject of PRC, do you think the 6.5 PRC is going to try to replace the 6.5 Creedmoor? Because I'm seeing more of those on the shelf.
Absolutely not.
Why is that?
Cost of ammo. And the cost to make it alone, and brass availability. 6.5 Creedmoor has been popular now for quite some time. Not as long as other cartridges, but the amount of ammo is ridiculous. The amount of stuff out there is ridiculous. 6.5 PRC, you get into the case design for both the 6.5, the 300, and now the 7 PRC, is a 375 Ruger parent case, which is its own thing. And it was actually meant to replace the 375 H&H, fun fact. So once you start getting into a proprietary case design, it is still relatively new on the cartridge scene. So I think they're still catching up with cases for sale, and then the distribution of that design to other manufacturers to make other types of brass for it.
That makes sense.
Or like other brands.
Right. That makes sense.
The 6.5 PRC, I would put up there with the 300 Win Mag as a great case design, because it does follow the same pattern of the 6.5 Creedmoor. Make the whole case shorter so that a longer bullet, heavier bullet can stick out more and not eat into the case capacity. I would like to get into the 7 PRC if I didn't have a 280 Ackley that I need to give my full attention to.
Understandable.
So, but 300 PRC, I would be curious to see if the military is already flirting with the idea, because I do know the military uses 308, 300 Win Mag, 338 Lapois. That's kind of their lineup before you get to 50.
Yep.
And before you get to 5.56 on the other end.
Yeah. Which, fun fact on the military use of this cartridge, when the military did some testing on this in the late 60s, the Department of the Navy did a bunch of testing on it, and they didn't like it.
No.
The
so Navy also had some really picky design aspects that they wanted in the cartridges.
But then later, here we are, post GWOT, or Global War on Terror, and the great and infamous Chris Kyle, rest in peace, that was one of his favorite rounds was 300 Win Mag. He preferred that over the 50 cal because, in his words, it had just as much power at the distance, but it was a lot lighter to carry.
And I'm surprised it's not 338 Lapois. I'll voice that to the listeners. But if it was a 300 Win Mag, that's awesome to hear. It is a fantastic cartridge. It was the second cartridge I used to hit 1,050 yards, my new record. First one was the 338 Lapois. So that's another great cartridge. And it's funny you bring up the Navy not liking the Winchester Magnum. They later, but they ended up getting the 338 Lapois to fit their crazy checklist.
Yeah. The Navy may not have liked it, but we still saw its use in Vietnam. So it was used by special operators there. And
I'll point out something that I think I actually got from the Hornady podcast. Feel free to go over there and check them out, because it is a really, really big informational podcast.
And tell them Buck and Squib sent you.
Yeah, great information center. But the 300 Win Mag was not really meant to be a military cartridge. I think Winchester really did release it to be a hunting line.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that since they were already designing it to put it in their Model 70, which at the time was a military rifle, I think the military saw that and went, well, we're already getting the rifles from them.
Right.
Let's get some ammo. And it is very capable.
Oh, yeah.
And it's something that is definitely separate from 308. It's more punch. And I think it does bridge a pretty good gap between the 338 Lapua and the 308.
Absolutely. It's a nice intermediate cartridge there. Not to say it's a small cartridge, but intermediate
No.
between those two.
Well, and it's funny, it's considered intermediate. There's some bore requirements that has to fit intermediate. I think it ends at like 35 or 37 or something. So I don't know what the 300 Win Mag classifies right now because I didn't look it up. Not gonna lie, folks. But no, it is a Magnum cartridge and it shoots a long ways. I know there are videos on YouTube, endless. You can shoot a mile, 2,000 yards plus pretty comfortably if you have your stuff dialed in. Bullet, powder charge, powder type, pace. So,
And a lot of it's going to, of course, depend on the rifle and the shooter's ability.
of course, and you should always be working on your fundamentals. Fun fact. So, reasonable expectations. I think that also Squibb had a great point that it'll depend on your fundamentals and kind of your practice and how much you've shot because my reasonable expectations for this cartridge are now set at 1,000.
Yeah.
Because I know my holds, I know my ballistic data, and hopefully reasonable expectations can be ever expanding when you use this cartridge. So it is really popular with both long distance shooters and hunters. That's one of the reasons why I got it. For a dual cartridge, the 300 Win Mag checks a lot of my boxes.
And that is a great way of putting it as a dual cartridge.
Yes.
I could take this to deer season this year. This could go to elk season. This has obviously been used in military operations. I mean, it is a very much of a dual cartridge.
Yeah. And I mean, the rifle I have it in, the Remington 700, is a light enough rifle to where I can pack it and get to the tree stand, but also heavy enough to where I can put that on a bench. It's braked. It's a braked rifle. So the recoil is not hellacious. I wouldn't like to shoot a Model 70 in 300 Win Mag because I think the Remington 700 I have has a little bit better recoil management system in the stock and the design than what I hear Winchester Model 70s would have.
It's understandable.
But I think that'd be an interesting comparison, Squibb, if we could get a Winchester Model 70, maybe like a 1970s or 1980s.
You and I were just talking before the podcast about how I've been kind of eyeballing one a little bit. I got a couple other things on my list before that, but that is really in the wheelhouse for maybe the next 6 to 12 months.
You'd have to make sure not to get the one with the plastic butt cap or like the stock end, because Winchester did that sometimes on their wood stocked rifles. They just slap a black Winchester plastic thing on the end.
Yeah, no thank you.
That's fine for light recoiling cartridges, but there's a reason that 300 Win Mag thwomps in some guns, and that's why.
That's a bruiser if you shoot it enough.
Yeah, so I think there's a really long way to go for any cartridge before this gets dethroned to thrown off. Just because there's so many factory options in the ammunition. There's so many rifles that are chambered in it.
Yeah, it's tough to dethrone a cartridge that's been used so widely and is so applicable for so many different things. I mean, we could say 30-30 was attempted to be dethroned, but there are going to be many deer dropped this year with 30-30.
And see, that's really interesting. Interesting you mentioned that, Squibb, because the 300 and 250 Savage, I think, were credited with trying to dethrone the 30-30. And I do think that they did in a way because they gave rise to the 308.
Exactly. Yeah, it spawned into something that kind of did dethrone it.
If you'd like us to do a 300 Savage or a 250 Savage episode, let us know, because those are some interesting cartridges.
Yeah, and that would be a big researcher one before we went live with that one. That would take a lot of research on my part for sure.
Yeah, spawned some great cartridges. Chambered to some really interesting rifles. The Savage 99 originally with a rotary magazine. So interesting stuff. But yeah, the 300 PRC, maybe in 5 years we can revisit this and kind of see what's going on, because I could see the 300 PRC kind of getting pushed into the military side of things.
Yeah.
Just because antiquated cartridge design in the actual case of the Win Mag. I don't want to say that it holds it back because I don't think it does, but I think the military would want to move into something more modern. I think you've definitely seen that with the 277 Fury that they just adopted. I think it was this year. They're using that in their DMR platform or main battle rifle platform.
Yeah.
And I think in turn, they'd also be looking at replacing the 300 Win Mag, maybe with a 300 PRC, something a little bit more efficient, something a little bit more modern. But I'd be curious to see if that happens, if Hornady's the only one loading for it.
Yeah, and when it comes to the military kind of phasing out weapons and whatnot, it takes them a long time to end up actually fully phasing them out. I mean, we have what do they take now? The SIG Spear is something that they're working on?
MCX.
Yeah, and I just, everybody's saying that's going to be the replacement for the M4.
And technically it is.
I highly disagree, and I don't see it happening even within the next 5 to 8 years.
So, I mean, we can get into this. Technically, yes, it is the replacement for the M4.
Yes.
But I think SIG is the only one making those guns.
Yep.
And I don't know their capacity to get guns out.
And I don't know, I won't pretend to know the number of M4s in our military's armories. I can only imagine the number is north of 800,000 units, let's say.
And this isn't something that's out of the ordinary for our military. If they were to keep M4s in stock for training, basic training,
or still, or still issue them to some units versus others.
Yeah, or like behind the desk units or reserve units, or we know the M4 is not going away,
right?
But we hopefully know that the MCX Spear is going to come in.
Yeah, I just cannot imagine Lake City for the ammunition plant, getting rid of their 5.56 NATO line.
Oh, of course not.
I just don't see that happening.
But it's a NATO cartridge, so
right.
Lake City can still load that and sell it to Great Britain, France, Germany, any NATO country that uses 5.56.
Maybe we'll see the M4 take the place of think of World War II, like the M1 carbine, how all of the drivers, everybody that wasn't a direct infantry personnel was issued an M1 carbine, which, for those of you that don't know, the M1 carbine is actually the most issued firearm of World War II for the Americans, not the M1 Garand.
The most manufactured.
Yes. And most issued. They were north of, I think they had almost 200,000 units more of the M1 carbines than the M1 Garands.
Oh, no doubt. Honestly, the M1 Garand, yes, it's famous. Yes, it's popular. When you look at the numbers, they didn't make near as many as you thought they would have.
No, and it was just one of those things where, all these different companies were making them, Singer, Rockola, the jukebox company, General Motors. I mean, everybody was making the Garands and M1 carbines. But to circle back, I just don't see.
You don't see the Win Mag being dethroned, huh?
I really don't. Yeah. I still see it being prevalent when our grandchildren are hopefully hunting.
Yeah.
I still see it available on the shelf in 50 years. I just cannot imagine this cartridge just going the way of the buffalo.
For hunting purposes, I would love this cartridge to keep its throne. For the steel side of things, it'd be interesting because I know different bullet diameters are going to come in and try to take over the 30, which some people will say it's already happened with 6.5 anyways, being the new hotness.
Right.
I'd like to see 25 caliber take off, but I don't think that's going to happen, Squib.
I mean, if we have 30-30 still available on the shelf 140 odd years later, and the ballistics on it are not near what they could be for modern cartridges, I just don't see this one going away.
And there's no doubt about ammo availability. people aren't just going to stop loading for it. Similarly, manufacturers aren't going to just stop chambering rifles for it.
Right.
But I'd love to see Hornady give those designs for someone else to load. And, if I could find Remington Core locked, not to start out the ammo list with those, Federal ammo, Norma, even, I don't know if Fiocchi makes rifle ammo.
Now that you mention it, I don't know if I've ever bought any rifle ammo from them. I know I just picked up some 9mm from them a couple weeks ago.
Fiocchi, prove us wrong. Send us ammo, please.
Yep, let us know.
Rifle ammo.
Make it for the Bucks Garage podcast.
Yeah. So, once they let other ammo manufacturers in and kind of make this cartridge, the 300 PRC that is, I think maybe we can take it a little bit more seriously to dethrone the 3 Win Mag. But I also think that leaving it on one ammo manufacturer to release a cartridge, make that cartridge, is...
That's tough to do.
Unrealistic.
Yeah, I don't care how big your ammunition company is. I don't care if it's Federal or Hornady. I cannot imagine one company that's going to be the one to make the big wave.
Right. And so now that we're on the topic of Hornady, I want to piggyback, Squib. Now that we're kind of ending the episode, we got a little spare time. They just released the 22 ARC yesterday.
Really?
Did you hear about that?
No, I did not.
No. Do you know anything about the 6 ARC by
A
chance?
little bit, not
Yeah.
gonna act like I have a lot of experience with it though.
No worries. That's what you got me for. So the 6 ARC was made of the same case as the 6.5 Grendel, which is the same case as the 7.62 by 39.
Okay.
And so the 6 ARC was purpose built for AR-15s for long distance application. And there's a lot of debate whether 6 ARC or 6.5 Grendel. They're both, I think, really fascinating cartridges.
Mm-hmm.
And I would probably give the nod of the head towards the 6 ARC a little bit in terms of efficiency and just pure design. 6.5 Grendel is fantastic, but I think really the only advantage you have there is if you're moving up bullet weight, obviously from 6 mil to 6.5. But off of the 6, and it's actually not based off the 6 ARC. I think it's based off the 6.5 Grendel, they said. They're making the 22 ARC.
Okay.
Which is fascinating.
Well, I love seeing changes to the 22 market. Even though I'm not a huge 22 shooter anymore, I like to see that cartridge still being tweaked.
Well, and I thought it was a very interesting move because I shoot a 224 Valkyrie, which, if you kind of look at the reason Hornady released their 22 ARC, and then you look at the 224 Valkyrie, and if you know the 224 Valkyrie, they look like the same purpose. The cartridges fit the same purpose. And they actually addressed that in a podcast episode, and the 22 ARC being a lot less finicky than the 224 Valkyrie. That being said, the 224 Valkyrie is a smaller case based off the 6.8 SPC cartridge. So that is smaller than 7.62 by 39, not by a whole lot, but by something. So,
right. And to correct myself from earlier, I'm a huge 22 shooter if you consider 223, which is a 22 caliber. I guess I should have corrected myself a little bit.
No, I think listeners should understand 22 cal, anything starting with 2.2. So 22 long rifle and 224 Valkyrie, 223 Remington, 222 Remington, 221 Remington Fireball, 220 Swift, 219 Zipper, 218B.
219 Zipper?
30-30, neck down to 22 cal.
Okay, that sounds cool. I want one now just for the name. What are you shooting? I'm shooting a Zipper.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Great cartridge.
Ooh, I bet that puppy moves.
It's fast, honestly. And the rimmed cartridge 30-30. I actually really like that cartridge design. I don't know what it is about rimmed cartridges, but it's pretty good.
Yeah. We got to mention 7.62 by 54R if we're going to talk about rimmed cartridges.
For rimmed cartridges and 303 British, yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure Ivan's all over the world would be mad if we didn't.
Yeah, for
It's a good round.
But yeah, 22 ARC. I'll be interesting to see because 224 Valkyrie was released by Federal. And I don't know what it is about Federal cases, but they have a habit of being released and falling on their face.
It can happen to anybody.
It can.
You know.
It's unfortunate because Federal does make decent ammo. I do like their stuff. But they released the 338 Federal. Actually at the same time as the 6.5 Creedmoor that was released by Hornady.
That explains a lot.
Yes. And I think it was very bad timing because the 338 Federal is actually a pretty nice case.
Yeah, it sounds like just a case of bad timing there.
Yeah, and 6.5 Creedmoor was 6.5 Creedmoor, and 338 Federal just fell.
Yeah, 8 years ago, I would have thought 6.5 Creedmoor was going to fizzle. I really thought it was going to fizzle. I just did not see it unseating anything, and here we are 8 years later from when I thought of that.
Yeah.
And good Lord, I have 6 of them on the shelf right now, and I've got probably 400 rounds of ammunition on our table. You know, it's here to stay.
My gun knowledge, ballistics knowledge, cartridge knowledge has come so far in 8 years to where I was definitely a 6.5 hater, a Creedmoor hater. Now I do like to use it. I still shoot more 308, really more 7.62 NATO. But I'll tip my hat to the Creedmoor in the sense that it's very pleasant to shoot.
And extremely capable.
Very capable, indeed. But I do have a heartfelt affection for the 30s, being the 7.62 NATO. I shoot 7.62 by 54R and the 300 Win Mag. I mean, those three are such nice guns, nice cartridges. I love shooting them. So, and I'm looking to get a 300 Blackout. So, I mean, 30s, and I'm starting to get into 7 mils, but 30s are kind of what I like. So, with that, I think we can cut off the cartridge talks for now. I think we might trim these episodes, Squib, honestly.
Yeah,
And maybe this will turn into a Patreon specific
there we go.
type of episode.
Mhm.
So if you're interested in anything like that,
Let us know.
will let us know, but also see our links in the description or our main YouTube page. We're trying to get on Spotify. And I know we say we're on Spotify in previous episodes. It hasn't happened yet because we need to start uploading. And at this point in time, I think we're a week away from release.
Yeah, we are a week away from release.
So,
I'm excited.
yeah, me too. We'll get on Spotify. We'll make sure that link is provided to everyone. Pilot episodes being released first, and it won't matter by the time you listen to this anyway, Squib. But um, feel free to check out our Patreon. Only one tier right now while we build up some followers and kind of get some ideas for what we want in the future of the podcast. In other resources, you can find our Instagram as well. That's the only social media we're on right now, but more to come, hopefully. And Spotify. Those are kind of our big three resources. If you're listening on Spotify or Patreon, check out our YouTube page. That's kind of our primary uploading source right now. And in the meantime, I think we can call it there, and we'll see you guys on the next podcast episode.
Absolutely. We'll see you next week, Buck.
All right.